Bibliophiles of the internet, today I thought it'd be a fun way to cap off the year to do a little inventory of the book series I have going on in some way, shape, or form. Before we get into it, first of all, this is not intended to be a complete or definitive catalog of every single series I've ever completed or started, because a lot of that information is not helpful for my purposes, so please don't expect it to be that. I'm trying to focus on the series I'm actively working on, the series that I intend to continue in the foreseeable future, so I can sort of have them all in one place. This will also not include manga series because most of those series just never end. So if you've seen me start something, I'm most likely still reading that series to this day. To make things easier on myself, I looked at all the series I've either started or been actively reading through since 2020 because that just seemed like a good starting point when trying to see what's actively on my radar at this point. I have this list categorized in two main parts: series I've fully caught up on as of filming this video, and series that I'm continuing / that are still being published. Starting with the series I've entirely caught up with for the moment. This first one's kind of a technicality because the third and final book is either coming out very soon or possibly already out by the time you see this. That trilogy is none other than the Forgery of Magic trilogy by Maya Montaigne. This is a criminally underrated YA high fantasy trilogy set in a Latina-inspired world. Let me repeat that really quick. A high fantasy series set in a Latina-inspired fantasy world. Where else are you getting that, babes? The story follows Finn, a thief who can magically change her face and appearance at will. She gets caught by a powerful mobster and forced into an impossible mission to either steal a legendary treasure from Castellan's royal palace or be forever stripped of her magic. But when Finn crosses paths with Alfie, the crown prince, they accidentally unlock a terrible ancient power that could very well devour their entire world if they don't find a way to contain it. Listen, I'm on hands and knees begging y'all to check out this trilogy. It's high drama, high stakes, there's a rich and exciting fantasy world, a great magic system that centers the use of Spanish, there's a heist element in the first book, and even a slow burn enemies to lovers romance. I love the push and pull of this central duo because they're working together and they want to support each other, but at the same time they're both being driven by their own motivations, and either one of them could jeopardize the fate of the entire world at any given moment. Another series I'm fully caught up on is the Fence comic series by Joanna the Mad and C.S. Packet. If there's one thing you need to know about me, it's that I love sports gaze, and this comic series is sports gaze at their finest. It's about this scrappy, self-taught fencer named Nicholas who just wants to compete against the best of the best, and he gets this scholarship to a private school that has one of the best fencing programs in the entire country. The catch? Not only is he going to have to earn his spot on the team if he wants to keep that scholarship, and not only is he going to have to become teammates with his biggest rival, Seiji Katayama, but he will also have to be Seiji's roommate. This series is just delightful in every imaginable way. It has a great cast of characters who are all lovable, bumbling idiots. It's extremely queer and tropey. It has all the dynamicism of a great sports anime. It perfectly balances the sports elements with delicious slow burn romance. It makes me so happy, and it's just fantastic. A series I'm caught up on that's set to finish next year, excitingly enough, is the Between the Earth and Sky trilogy, which I usually just refer to as the Black Sun trilogy by Rebecca Roanhorse. This is an indigenous high fantasy trilogy set in a pre-colonial, pre-Columbus version of the Americas. We're following a bunch of different characters, but most predominantly there's a blind prophet of sorts named Serapio who's traveling to the holy city of Tova for the solar eclipse, which has been predicted to be the unbalancing of the world. I'll just leave it at that for now. I've said it before, but this is some of Rebecca Roanhorse's best work. It feels like everything in her career has been leading her to this trilogy. It's immaculately plotted, it has a great cast of dynamic characters, and it's always satisfying and surprising to see how these storylines effortlessly converge. No pun intended. On a very different note, this year I also read the first two books in what's called the Mr. Darcy and Miss Tilney series by Claudia Gray, the first of which is called The Murder of Mr. Wickham. I'm so stoked to talk about these because I never got the chance to properly review them on my channel since I listened to both of them during my medical hiatus. But as you might be able to tell from the title, this is Claudia Gray's historical fiction expansion of the Jane Austen verse. In these stories, she brings all of Austen's characters together and throws them in the middle of these scandalous locked room murder mysteries. But while Jane Austen's original characters are definitely present and a big part of the story, we're actually following Juliet Tilney, daughter of the Knightleys, and Jonathan Darcy, son of the Darcys, as they get thrown together at these crime scenes and decide to investigate these murders in secret. This is the year I've discovered that I love a good historical murder mystery, and the 2 books in this series so far are excellent examples of the genre at its best. It's such a great mix of pulling in the Austen canon, putting in all these little Easter eggs for Jane Austen fans to enjoy, but using that as a foundation to build something entirely new and original with these 2 really endearing characters. Jonathan Darcy is also canonically neurodivergent in this series, most likely autistic, which absolutely tracks if you look at the behavior of his father, and the fact that Claudia Gray very intentionally and very thoughtfully makes that part of the story makes it resonate even more, in my opinion. These books are just really fun to read. The mysteries are compelling and exciting to puzzle out. I love how they celebrate the underdogs. They celebrate impropriety in a sense, because these are 2 characters marginalized by society in one way or another who are going against the grain, following their instincts, discarding the useless rules of society that often hold them back, and ultimately seeking justice. I also highly recommend the audiobooks. They're read by Billy Fulford Brown, whose narration is so charming, so personable, and she does such a great job navigating these stories that have these huge casts of characters. She plays it perfectly. She really leans into the slow burn romance between Jonathan and Juliet as well. The audiobooks are just delightful. I enjoyed them so much, and I will be making a point of listening to the 3rd one as an audiobook as well. Dramatically switching gears again, this was also the year I got caught up on the Locked Tomb series, which is of course written by Tamsin Muir and starts with Gideon the Ninth. Speaking of next level audiobooks, this is another great series for that because Moira Quirk is a sensational voice for this series, so if you can access those, I also recommend them. This series was infamously taglined as Lesbian Necromancers in Space, and listen, a lot of people take issue with that tagline because they claim it's inaccurate, but boiled down to its most essential parts, that's literally what this is. But it's much more than that, of course. It's really an edgy, gutsy, balls-to-the-wall sci-fi fantasy series that also starts off as a locked room murder mystery, coincidentally enough. Gideon herself is not actually a necromancer. She's a swordswoman, also known as a cavalier. She was raised in the 9th house, not by choice, but by circumstance, and has hated every single second of it. When she attempts a desperate escape, she's stopped by none other than Harrow Hark-Nona-Jesmus, Reverend Daughter of the 9th house, and powerful Bone Witch. Now, Harrow has just been summoned by the Emperor to take part in a deadly trial of wits and skill, and if she can not only figure out his little puzzle but also survive it, Harrow will become an immortal, all-powerful right hand to the Emperor himself. But she'll need the help of her cavalier to do it. Listen, I know this series is polarizing as hell. You either have people sobbing about it or fuming about it. There is no in between. Personally, I have loved all 3 books so far with my entire heart. They're fun, they're badass, they're one of a kind, they blitz together all these different genres and inputs and aesthetics into something soul-searing and wholly unprecedented in so many ways. I love the balance this series is somehow able to strike. It both doesn't care about the reader's comfort or ability to situate themselves in the story, and also does some of the best and most subtle world building in order to ensure that the payoff is always there, and that the reader actually can track where they are in this convoluted, bizarre plot that comes hurtling at them 100 miles a minute, even when they think they can't. It's irreverent, it's profane, it's tongue-in-cheek, it's high-octane, it's imaginative, it's a series that won't hold your hand, but is so much better for it. Take my word for it, once we actually have a release date for Alecto, I will happily be revisiting these. These are in chronological order, by the way, so if they sound more and more familiar to you, it's because I've talked about them recently, and in that vein is the Belladonna trilogy by Adeline Grace. I am obsessed with these books in a way I did not think I would be. At first glance, they come off as basic bitch white girl fantasy, and you cannot get mad at me about that comment because you know exactly what I'm talking about. You know. Anyways, it's this upper YA gothic historical romantasy series that also has a bit of a murder mystery to it. The story is about Signa, who's been followed by death her entire life. Everyone in her family and all of her subsequent caretakers have met mysterious and untimely deaths after coming into contact with her. But little do they know that death doesn't just metaphorically follow Signa, but she actually has an inseverable bond with death himself. She gets shipped off to her last remaining relatives, the Hawthorns, who are fabulously wealthy and also wildly eccentric. The matriarch of the family has recently passed away, so the family is still mourning that loss. And now the daughter of the family has also come down with the same mysterious illness that claimed her mother's life. But because Signa can sort of traverse the veils between life and death, she's contacted by the late mother's spirit, and she realizes that this may not actually be a natural illness. Listen, you've heard me talk about both Belladonna and Foxglove effusively. For me, everything about this series just works. The intoxicating, otherworldly romance is just delicious. The mystery elements are always dark and twisted and deeply fascinating. There's an exploration of playing into society's expectations, but also being trapped by them. I just cannot say enough good things about the twists and turns this series takes. It has thoroughly surprised me in the best ways possible, and I cannot wait to see what Wisteria holds in 2024. Another series you've heard me talk about recently is the Indian Lake trilogy, starting with My Heart is a Chainsaw by Stephen Graham Jones. This is a trilogy of horror books following an indigenous young woman named Jade, who we meet as a teenage slasher film enthusiast. And when her small lakeside town of Proof Rock is plagued by a series of gruesome murders, she finds herself living through a slasher instead of just watching one from behind a screen. I'm not going to say too much about this because y'all heard me gush about the sequel Don't Fear the Reaper in my November wrap-up, because it was phenomenal. I love everything Stephen Graham Jones is doing in this trilogy. It's so clear that he has such a fine-tuned understanding of the slasher genre and the horror genre as a whole. I already know that book 3 is gonna kick so much ass. And the most recent series I've caught up on, oddly enough, is the Alex Stern series by Leigh Bardugo, which starts with Ninth House. I'm sure you've heard about this. It's a really interesting blend of contemporary fantasy, dark academia, occult magic, and just a dash of murder mystery as well. The series is following a young girl named Alex Stern who's basically been drafted to attend Yale University, not as a student per se, but as a member of the Ninth House, which is one of the secret magical societies on campus that's charged with monitoring the other secret societies, overseeing their magical rituals, and making sure they don't misuse or abuse their magic. And she's been specially chosen for this position because she basically has the ability to see spirits. I say oddly enough about catching up with this series because I've been on the fence about it for so many years, and I vlogged my experience reading the first book recently, and I think it's very clear that my feelings were conflicted at best. In terms of the genre inputs, in terms of the nested storytelling, it absolutely has that enticing, dark, magical intrigue, but it's also safe to say that it's somewhat problematic. But I did recently read Hellbent, so here we are. I'm officially getting caught up on the series one way or another, I guess. Now I'm gonna switch over to series that I intend to continue on with, even though I might be a book or two behind. Some are completed, some are ongoing without a clear end date or final book set in stone, and I'm gonna be a little bit more rapid fire about it, so let's just get into it. Starting with the Nevermore series by Jessica Townsend, which I have not read from or thought about in the hottest of seconds. This is a fun, whimsical, middle-grade fantasy adventure series with a bunch of classic touchstones from the genre. It's about a cursed girl who discovers this wondrous new magical world that she gets whisked away into, and if she wants to stay there, she'll have to go through a series of magical trials. These also have really great audiobooks that I remember enjoying very much. They're read by Gemma Whalen, interestingly enough, who played Yara Greyjoy in Game of Thrones, but she does a really great job with these stories. I fell off the train a bit because there was a really long wait between books, but I think the fourth one is set to come out in 2024. In a very similar vein, I do intend to eventually continue on with the Supernatural Investigations trilogy, also known as Amari and the Night Brothers by B.B. Alston. Another middle-grade fantasy adventure about Amari, whose brother went mysteriously missing, and she's the only one still holding out hope that he's out there somewhere. One day she finds this mysterious briefcase hidden in her brother's closet and discovers that he left her a nomination to try out for the super magical, super secret Bureau of Supernatural Affairs. Again, really enjoyed the first book when I first listened to it back in 2021. I held off continuing with the series because, again, I didn't want to wait a super long time for book 3 and just forget everything in the process. process of waiting. But the third and I believe final book is also slated for 2024 as of this point. I'm gonna stay on the middle grade kick before switching gears by saying I'd love to eventually get back to the Ava Evergreen series by Julie Abe. As of right now, this is sitting at a duology. I don't know if it's considered completed or if there might be opportunities to expand the universe in the future. As you can tell from the cover, this series has big Kiki's Delivery Service vibes, and it's so much fun. It's about a young witch named Ava who only has just a pinch of magic, and she has to achieve the rank of novice witch before her 13th birthday if she wants to keep that magic. So she's assigned to this little seaside town for a month where she has to set up shop and help the populace in some kind of measurable way to prove that she is worthy of her magic. It's really sweet, it's fun, it's imaginative, it's also really cozy because of the setting and the characters. I had a great time reading the first book, and I absolutely have every intention of going back to read the sequel at some point. A series and really an author that needs no introduction or explanation is The Great Cities duology by N.K. Jemisin. Listen, I've read every single novel that N.K. Jemisin has ever published, with the exception of this. The City We Became is like a trippy, cerebral, borderline eldritch kind of contemporary sci-fi story that exudes big sensate energy in my humble opinion. The only reason I haven't read book 2 is because, frankly, I'm scared of how it might end, and I also don't like not having an unread book from N.K. Jemisin in my back pocket to look forward to, if that makes sense. Recently, there's also been a much anticipated addition to the Dark Rise series by C.S. Packet. I read the first book back when it came out in 2021. It's a queer YA historical fantasy series set in a version of London, I think, which is built upon the ruins of an ancient magical world that was completely destroyed. And now the only ones who remember this world are the stewards, who are sworn to protect humankind if the Dark King ever returns. Our main character, Will, believes himself to be a perfectly ordinary dock boy, but he stumbles into this prophecy where it's foretold that his destiny is to fight alongside the stewards and play a vital role in the oncoming battle between the light and the dark. Listen, the first book in this series messed me up so good. C.S. Packet knows how to write intense, unforgettable political drama. They know how to pull the strings of a finely tuned plot to keep you guessing until the very last page. I am equally intrigued and terrified by what might happen in the second book. On a very different note, I have not continued on with the Bright Falls companion trilogy from Ashley Herring Blake. It's a trilogy of interconnected standalone adult romance novels that all center sapphic romances. I read Delilah Green Doesn't Care as an arc and really enjoyed it, and even though I own the next 2 books in the trilogy, I just have not continued on for some reason, and I don't know why. This next series would have been in the caught up category, except there was another installment recently released that I haven't read yet. I am, of course, talking about the Gods of Hunger series by R.M. Virtues. It's an indie published queer adult romance series that blends erotica and urban low fantasy in a sense. It's a modern reimagining of the Greek pantheon, but positing the Greek gods as super wealthy, feuding business owners in this gritty city district. It's so much more than that, but I'm just trying to boil it down to something concise. It's romantic, it's intense, it's sleek, it's sexy. I love everything about it, and I cannot wait to read the 4th book, which is about Patroclus and Achilles. Moving right along, I am of course continuing on with the Singing Hills cycle, which is a fantasy novella series by Nivo. These are interconnected fantasy novellas about a non-binary traveling cleric named Chi who goes around this fantasy world collecting stories to preserve them for future generations. Each installment plays with different storytelling conventions in really compelling ways, and they all explore the phenomenon of stories within stories. I love them so much, and I may or may not have an arc of The Bride of High Hill on my e-reader as we speak. On the more underrated side, I still have to read the second book in the Healer of the Water Monster duology by Brian Young. This is an indigenous middle grade fantasy adventure series about Nathan, who doesn't want to spend the summer with his dad and his dad's new girlfriend, so he goes to stay with his grandma on the Navajo reservation instead. One night, after getting lost in the nearby desert, Nathan stumbles upon this ancient holy creature known as the Water Monster who needs his help in order to survive. I really loved the first book. I think it takes middle grade fantasy to such an exciting and compelling place. The story also beautifully explores conversations about mental health, especially for young kids, and reframing the ways we contextualize the concept of healing. It was brilliant, and I can't wait to eventually read book 2. We're in the final stretch with series from this year that I will be continuing, starting with the Convergence Saga by Cadwell Turnbull. I've said this before, but if you like N.K. Jemisin, you should be reading Cadwell Turnbull Turnbull, and I will stand by that till the day I pass from this earth. But this is another fascinating blend of urban fantasy and cosmic horror, and it's about what happens to modern society when it's revealed that monsters do in fact exist. I think about No Gods, No Monsters on a regular basis. That first book messed me up in the most profound ways. Again, this series has stellar audiobooks read by Dion Graham that I highly recommend. The sequel, We Are the Crisis, is not even a question mark to me at this point. Me and that book are on an irreversible collision course. Of course, wrapping up next year, we have the Gideon Testaments by Freydis Moon. You've heard me talk about these novellas multiple times, but these are a series of queer novellas that blend together horror and romance. The first book is about a trans witch priest who's commissioned by a non-binary homeowner to exorcise their incredibly creepy, unruly haunted house, and the series progresses from there. Ever since I first read Exodus 23 back in 2022, I've been a firm believer when it comes to Freydis' work. I love everything they're doing, I love their brand, I love their vision, I love this quote-unquote perversion of religious magic that they're committed to exploring in all of their stories. I have no idea what Saint Sorrow Sinner might hold, but I cannot wait. Another duology that kind of flew under the radar for me personally because I also started it during my medical hiatus is The Darkening by Sunya Mara. If you're on TikTok or if your FYP is adjacent to Book Talk in any way, then you've most likely heard of Sunya Mara. Not in a Book Talk hype train kind of way, but the fact that she executes some of the best self-marketing for her own work despite being published by a Big 5 publisher is not even up for debate at this point. To her immense credit, her incredible videos did entice me and did convince me to start this series, which is a fantasy series about Vesper, who's the daughter of failed revolutionaries. Her mother was already exiled into this mysterious storm perpetually surrounding the city, and now the authorities have finally caught up with her father, who's protecting a book of dangerously experimental magic. This was a pleasant surprise. I didn't really know what to expect going into it. It does have some elements that are prototypical YA fantasy in a sense, but I think it also goes to some incredible places in the way it explores how we respond to generational trauma and what we're forced to become if we hope to move past it. I certainly enjoyed it enough to know that I definitely want to read the second and final book in the duology, which is called The Light Struck, so I will do that at some point. Finally, we have another series I talked about very recently in my November wrap-up. That is the Nampesha Wayasit series by Monoquill Blackgoose. I'm not sure if this is the first in a trilogy or part of a longer series, but it's an indigenous historical fantasy series about a young woman named Anakus, who is the first person in many generations on her home island to find and bond with a dragon hatchling. Unfortunately, the teachings for how to raise a dragon in the traditional ways of her people have been all but entirely lost. And before she can even make any decisions, the English conquerors catch wind of her dragon hatchling and force her to enroll in an English dragon academy where she must learn to train her dragon in the proper way or risk losing her forever. Again, I talked about this book at length in my November wrap-up. I love the way the story celebrates and centers decolonial modes of storytelling and decolonial ways of existing and accessing knowledge. It's deeply fascinating, it's surprisingly slice of life in a way I really enjoyed, and it's also delightfully queer and polyamorous as well, and I'm really looking forward to whatever is next for the series. So those are all the series I have actively going on at the moment with a little asterisk. Again, this is not a complete list because there were a few question marks as I was researching my reading history, and I also just might have missed something because I am human. Speaking of which, I'm pretty sure I missed the Masa and Pleiti novella series, so just add that to the list. But hopefully this introduced you to something new or reminded you of a series that you would also like to continue with in the coming year or years. If you've started any of these series yourself, or if you want to tell me about which series you have going on at the moment, I'd love to chat with you about all of that down below in the comments. That is everything I had to share for this video today. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, educate yourself, be kind to yourself, take care of yourself, and I will catch you on the flip side of the page.